All right, so for anybody listening, this is week one, end of week one for DS11. I can't believe it's been 11 already. So this week they were learning Alteryx, and so their project for today was to look at one of their initial applications, find some additional data to supplement it with, use Alteryx to combine it all together, and then make over their application. Sound about right? Hopefully that's what everybody did. Okay, good. So first up is Pauline from our Dutch team. So I'm going to make you presenter.
Should I do anything else?
And then do, that's fine to share your screen. Yes, let's do that. Click open store. Okay, just do it this way. Add to Chrome. Add extension. Yeah. When you guys join the GoTo meeting, make sure you pick this option over here that says phone call when you look in the audio. That way it doesn't pick up your computer audio, because I'm doing everything through this speaker. So that'll avoid feedback. Okay.
So now can I?
You're ready? Yep. Okay, ready?
Okay,
Introduce yourself as well, because the people on the recording won't know who you are.
Yeah, okay. So my name is Pauline. I entered the Dutch team 3 weeks ago, and I was here to know a little bit basic stuff about Alteryx. And I think I will show you what I've done, but I also want to tell you my experience about last week, because I know maybe some of you have noticed, but it was a little struggle for me. It was a challenge, a struggle with me, myself, and I, mostly, I think. And it made me black out and shut almost every day, and again today. So I don't have a lot to show.
That's okay.
It has made me realize where I need to work on, and I do find it very nice to know that or to experience, like, everybody's willing to help, and you're allowed to ask questions. But for me, I notice it's very difficult, to ask questions and to acknowledge, okay, maybe I'm not good at this, or not as fast as everybody else, or I'm doing it in a different way. So that was actually maybe the most important thing I learned this week. So I have a lot of respect for you guys, how you're coping and what you're going to do. So that was actually the main thing I wanted to tell you. So a little bit about the content. So I made a visualization about the Eurovision Song Festival earlier. And actually, I wanted to look into whether there was this bias on migration or religion, compared to voting. So I used a UN data source about religion. And what I did here, actually together with Andy, here at first I cleaned a little bit, or at least I renamed some stuff, and I changed the data types. And in order to, because there were like a lot of rows per country, and in order to only have like the most recent data, there's this summarize tool in it. So I only kept like the most recent data, and then I joined them back together. So only to keep the most recent ones. And then I joined this one with my initial data set. And as you can see, some of the records were left out because either they weren't in the UN data set, or they didn't enter the Eurovision part. So that's why not everything is in my join. And my dashboard, it's not very, so again, not very happy with it, but what I was trying to do, I already told you, I was trying to tell a story about political bias or anything, and I came as far as this is that you can here see like the average points per country, and if you click on it, you can see the three biggest religions in the specific country. So it's far from perfect, and it's not a complete story. But as I said, I struggled, and yeah, so.
It's okay. Feedback, questions? Anybody else feel like that this week? Everybody? Yeah. See, you're not alone. I told you.
No, I know.
Yeah. Definitely won't be one of those say some of those things.
Yeah. But good. The good thing is you found your way to finish, right? Even though we have a finite amount of time, and you got something done in that amount of time. That's the most important thing. So.
Yeah, and for me, it was already a big thing to have told you that I was struggling and told my boss Martijn that I was struggling. So that was a big accomplishment for me this week. So.
The only thing I would recommend when you're presenting is never start with an apology.
Oh, okay.
Always start, never apologize for your work, because then everybody thinks negatively about your presentation before you even start.
Yeah,
so
I understand.
That's feedback for everybody. So.
Yeah. But again, thanks for the good vibe and yeah.
Okay, great. Well done. Who wants to go next?
Or should I finish this?
Okay, come on up.
I think other people feel better about the
Okay. Say you're doing the same thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Or should
I
I?
wasn't apologising. That was a good thing.
Okay. Did you join the GoToMeeting?
It's telling me to give it a phone number.
Oh, just cancel out of that. Yeah.
Do I need to?
Yeah. Let me take the control back from you.
So maybe I should.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're done. Yeah.
Good luck.
All right, are you back in, Nick?
I agree with that.
Let's see. Are you in there again? Can you just hit refresh in the window? Let's see if it doesn't look like you're showing up. Okay. So say, okay, I'm all set. All right, so now you should be in there. There we go. I think because you closed your computer, wrong button. So
Is that my laptop feedback or is it?
It shouldn't be because you're on phone. So go to Open Store. We only have to do this once. Add Chrome.
Oh, right.
Add extension. And now it should flip back over to or it's probably going to ask you now. So go ahead and close this window.
Close this one?
Yeah, there we go. And just do share. And there you go. Okay, let's go introduce yourself.
Yep. Well, I'm Nicholas Boskill, or Nick as I prefer to be known. And yesterday when I opened up, searched the FBI website for all the data sets that I used, I was quite happy to see what a mess of a data set I picked up. And I had flashbacks to remembering the horrendous amount of time I spent on Excel just stitching bits and pieces together. So I thought I'd just show you what I chose. I chose to use the states, but I used the data source. They only do in 2-year periods. So to get any length of time, I had to use a lot of different Excel sheets and just sort of stitch them together in a horrendous way. And as well, it categorized the states by the area in America that they were done. Categorized the crimes by violent crime and property crime. It was just not great. So I thought this was great for Alteryx, and I had a good time on Alteryx this morning, stitching this together.
So what you'll learn eventually is you can probably do all this in about 4 tools, right? Is that about right?
I hope so, yeah. So I did try the wildcard, bring it in, but because of differences in how they did stuff, how they labeled stuff, and also adding in rows every couple of years. It made it very difficult because it changed the formatting, so I couldn't figure it out myself. And yeah, so started off with a bit of cleaning up, just checking what was going on. I'll just zoom in. And getting rid of some of the columns that weren't used. As it came in like this, so it wasn't great. Got it to the point where I was able to take the first row and use it as the field titles, and kept on going across to do some changes on it. I'll just try and get the more interesting things. So just cleaned it up generally until I got to the point where it was quite a nice looking sort of table, but I still had in the areas I had the regions as well as the states. So I decided to bring in a separate Excel sheet with just states on it, then join them together here. So up here I have all of the states that came out of it. Underneath I have none, which is good. And then in the join I have 100 records because there's 2 years for this file. So the 50 times 2 is 100, so that's also nice. Good checking. So in order to join this, it was being a bit fiddly, so I had to remove all spacing in the states. So coming out of it, after new, west, north, and south, I added back in a space. Then over here, down here is realizing that Rhode Island is also 2 words. So adding a space back into that.
I was just going to answer
that. Yeah. So because of the different formatting in each of the files, I had to sort of copy and paste it and then fiddle around on each of the lines where it said there was errors and where it was like different title names and all of this.
So the kind of section there where you have your second input with the state names, scroll just to the left of it.
Here?
Yeah. So everything from this where you kind of input the additional state names to the right, are those the same steps for each one as you go down?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I just had to, it was before that where they had different citations, different,
right.
Some of them, the states had a comma after them, or some sort of punctuation after them, which was very annoying.
Okay. So what you'll learn eventually is how when you have repetitive steps like that in multiple streams, you just make what's called a macro. So you'll learn about those in a couple of weeks. Yeah, that would probably be very useful. So then my supplementing data, which I maybe should have thought about what I was going to do with it a bit more, but I thought at the time that it was useful, was unemployment rates. And again, tried to do the wildcard, but couldn't quite figure it out due to a few different things. But this was just unemployment rates in the different states. So sorted these out, joined them back up into one nice one, transposed it, so creating just one column with the years, as I did up for the other ones as well. Joined them back together to a way that gave me the crime type, so the category being violent crime and property crime, crime type, the amount, and the amount per 100,000, and then just for that state, the unemployed. And then I came onto Alteryx and realized I should have thought a bit more about what my data was showing. So this was my original with just the amount of crime committed in America. So I did a hex map with the different line graphs showing the different types of. Presentation mode.
Yes. Yeah. So the different types of crime. So I could click on this and see where certain things were particularly bad. Alaska's a very weird one. They seem to respect each other's property quite a bit, but they do not respect each other. As yeah, it was very odd. That was something I noticed. So I just wanted to see if I could find something to do with this and the unemployment rates and see if that helped change it. So I had the idea of maybe doing two hex maps together, and the unemployment rate would be the middle hex, and the outer one would be the crime again. But it was a bit confusing, and it kind of meant that the closer the two colors were, the more correlated they were together. But it was a bit too confusing. It needed more explanation. That would be nice. So I didn't actually produce any improvements, so I apologize for that. But I have a few ideas of where I can go. So I have a trellis. I did have a trellis that's been changed into this. So could try and see how rank each of the unemployment and the crime, and use one of these to take it across, but just make it a little bit more presentable and bring in something else to a few more years, so it's more of a running thing. But yeah, that was where I got to really. So I certainly learned that I needed to leave myself a bit more time on Tableau. Tableau wasn't my strong suit, and I needed to not get quite so caught up in all of the Alteryx sorting.
Yeah, so one thing to think about then is how do you want your data to look in the end?
Yes.
And then go backwards from there.
Yeah, I certainly should have done that. I should have not thought that when I came to Tableau, it would just come to me and I'd be like, okay, this is the graph I can use and this is how it will be. I just came to Tableau and I was like, I feel like there's very little I can do here. Tried to play around as much as I knew, asked a few people for help, and by the time that I had a few ideas that I could maybe stitch together, the time was gone, so I wasn't able to make a presentable improvement on my previous dashboard.
Okay, well done. Good job.
Thanks very much.
You've given yourself homework.
Yes, I certainly have.
All right. Who's next? Let's see you in here, Andrew. You might need to just refresh. Oh, you still need to just do join computer audio. Or I'm sorry, shoot. Sorry, I hit the wrong one. Yeah, I'll probably ask you again. Yeah, because we don't want it to give feedback. You just say, okay, I'm all set. And type your name in there, and then I'll make you a presenter. There we go. Presenter.
Shall I start with my previous?
So go back over to Chrome.
Sorry.
To Chrome. Yeah. And do Open Store. You'll need to do this once. Add to Chrome. Add extension, and then flip back over to the GoToMeeting screen and share. Perfect. All right.
Okay, so I'm Andrew. From the data school from a background in biomedical science and emergency medicine, and that's what my application was based around. My original application took data from the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation to look at leading causes of mortality globally, and this was the sort of starting point I came from, looking at leading life expectancy across continents, the leading cause of mortality in different regions, and factors influencing it. So if I go to my Alteryx workflow, this is what I did today. And it's more or less what took me about 2 to 3 weeks doing for my application. So that's good.
So is this the same data as your original data set that you manipulated manually and you just redid it? Kind of like
from the same data sources. Okay. So from the Institute of Health Metrics, I added in a folder of, instead of just mortality rates, also disability adjusted life years. Okay. But I didn't have time to put that into my visualization yet. I added in a file GDP from the World Bank and a separate file on life expectancy. So So if we start with mortality data and disability adjusted life year data, union those two, and then join that to, I also got data from the World Health Organization on the ranking they assign to each country that is a member of them, based on basically how good their healthcare is, based on a number of factors. So I inputted that, cleaned it up, as some of the fields were not needed and some had leading and trailing white spaces, and then joined all three of those together. Some of the countries didn't match, so Andy and I split the ones that didn't match up, and then I used a number of formula tools to just replace country names. So they matched, some were in original country languages and so forth. Joined those again and unioned them back to the original countries that did match. I then input a reference matrix for continents, because that information wasn't included in the original, so it just had 2 rows, continent and country, to match that, and then put GDP data in after cleaning that up, and stuck it all together at the very end, and came up with this.
Andrew, did you think about trying to use a fuzzy match on the country names rather than
I haven't used that
cutting up and joining it? Or
sorry, I don't know.
when you said you had some country names that were similar but not perfectly matching, did you try and use a fuzzy match tool on that at all?
They weren't that similar. Some of them were like Ivory Coast was Cote d'Ivoire and things like that.
Right.
Russian Federation.
Right.
So,
Yeah, you need a thesaurus for that.
yeah. So if we look at average life expectancy, we can see that Africa sits well below the rest of the continents. Does anyone want to guess what this dip is? It's in North America.
In 2010 or 2000?
Yes.
It's not Katrina. That was too long ago.
It's the Haitian earthquake.
Ah, okay. Wow.
What, sorry?
The Haitian earthquake?
Like in Haiti.
What numbers are these then? It's not life expectancy at birth.
No, this is average life expectancy taken from all the countries for that year.
So it's actually life then? Is it people's lives being cut short?
Yeah. So it's
normally you see life expectancy at birth.
yeah. So it's the average length of life in that
the
year.
average age of people which died in that year.
Yes. Yeah. And that's all put out. That's under life expectancy on that database. So yeah, you're right. It's strange. Here in Africa, that's 94. That was the Rwandan genocide. If you break these down onto specific countries, the average life expectancy for Rwandans drops to 11 in 1994.
Holy cow.
So you see those drops when a bunch of people are killed who are not of average life expectancy. If everybody killed in that period was about 58, it wouldn't do anything to the curve.
Exactly.
As you go down into the countries.
I could put that in right now, yeah, if you want.
Which is why they measure life expectancy at birth, not life expectancy at death.
So it's quite messy, but if you have those. Yeah.
You get your axis fixed. That's why. So hit the little pin at the top.
Mm-hmm. This one.
Now up on the toolbar where it says standard.
Yeah. 11 and a half there.
Holy cow.
Yeah, that's the earthquake. The earthquake.
The Boxing Day tsunami. Is that feature in it?
I didn't see it. I don't think it. I'm not sure if Sri Lanka.
Indonesia.
No, it didn't. It didn't stand out
Right.
from amongst the other
So
countries,
if
but it
you
may
right
well be
click
in
on
there.
the country field you have on the marks card there,
Mm-hmm.
right click on that, and choose show highlighter. And then on the right hand side, you could just type the country in on the right where that highlighter is. Yeah. So Indonesia is in there.
Oh, here.
A little bit.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. But within sort of the grand scheme of the continents, it didn't stand out.
So, like, how many deaths was the Rwandan genocide? Millions.
Yeah, there were.
Yeah.
Relative. Yeah. Cool. Nice.
And then, sorry, one bit. Also, what's quite cool, what I originally put in my first application was this slider tool. And in Tableau, it's very cool, it plays it like an animation. But when you put it on yes, it does not.
Yeah.
And the email I got back from you was, why does it say 2016? I spent so long relying on this slider to make it look cool. But now, the way it works, so I can play it.
It still won't work if you publish it, but it is for the demo now. Yeah.
That's true in all flavors of Tableau server, not just so online, public also.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So what you can see is the changes in cause of mortality across the world. Red is cardiovascular disease. It's the most common in developed countries. Green here is common infectious diseases, leading cause of mortality in Africa and throughout sort of Southeastern Asia. Purple here being HIV and tuberculosis, really prevalent in sub-Saharan Africa, along with these other infectious diseases and occasionally outbreaks of malaria. The orange bubbles that you saw bursting out every now and then, that'll be acts of terrorism and war and genocide in different countries. So you can see that in the Haitian earthquake as a natural disaster as well, that factors under the same area. If we focus then down on Africa, you can see, if I play that as well, you can see.
Hang on 1 second, the screen's catching up.
There we go. You can see those dots, bubbles changing size. Last time, no, you can't. It stopped. And yeah, you can see the spread of, as purple, the spread of.
I think the air team just died. Tom jinxed this. It was working fine until he came today. Sorry.
It's coming back.
My desk yet. I'm just going to ask you to reconnect.
Do I have to reconnect in Chrome?
No.
Okay.
You'll see this picture locks, it's the airtime default. You can see if you can work out who's flying the drone. Took that picture by looking at all the people in that picture. For another day, when it comes back.
Okay.
Try something else. No, that doesn't work either. All right. But no good joke.
What do you get if you cross the data visualization expert with the cocaine trafficker?
Oh, God.
Tableau Escobar.
That's your only joke too, isn't it?
My only joke in this context.
Yeah.
All right, so this is not working. Okay, I'm going to share screen. Is it back up?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. And then the final thing I did today was to use the extra data that I stuck on, which was from the Health Performance Index, GDP, and health expenditure per capita, and compare it to the rates of mortality in those African countries. So all the African countries are color-coded red here. The darker red countries are those that in this top left plot sort of have higher levels of mortality than average. And that darker red color coding is then carried over for those countries onto GDP and health expenditure. So you can tell that those are the ones that factor below. And what you'll notice of this trend is that those that have a higher than average rate of mortality also generally tends to have lower health expenditure, rank lower in that health performance index and generally have lower rates of GDP. Outliers here, Equatorial Guinea, South Africa, and Namibia.
What's the one in the bottom right?
This one here?
No, probably. What's the top one?
Central African.
And the outliers top left, Andrew, on that chart. On the top left chart, what are the top left first red ones?
Sorry?
No, the upper left, the top left of that.
This one?
Yeah, like that one there.
Morocco. So some of those, before I split it to Northern Africa and the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa, I couldn't find a continent file today that had those names. When I did it originally, I manually rotated next to one of those countries.
Yeah.
Like 200 times.
We don't need to manually do it. You can just put them on the map and then lasso it, right click and group.
Yeah.
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 You can tablet for a week. So.
But when you split it into Sub-Saharan and North Africa, you see that divide much more clearly in those rates.
Cool. Well done. Good job. I'll take it. Cheers. Who's going next?
That's Ellie saying the exact same thing on it.
Not in there either.
See AD on the chat there.
Are you joining again? Yeah. So
She's just listening to what we're talking about and repeating it in the chat. And then playing it instead of before we
yeah, typical 80.
She's going to use it as well.
That's intentional as well. All right, let's see here. What is it? It says it's ready. What name did you log in as? Oh, let me just refresh it. Try it the hard way. The first time getting these set up is always the hardest, by the way. Looks like you've got a screen inside of a screen. That's impressive. Oh, that's Andrew's screen as well. Okay, so you are not. Phone call. All right. So how are you logged in? That's what I want to know, what your name is on here. Anybody know? You forgot your name? Let's see. You are, so this is you. Stupid English keyboards. Okay, there we go. So now I can find you on here. Presenter. Okay, so now we'll do open store, add to Chrome, add, okay, and sure. Okay, so over to you. Okay.
So, my name's Jonathan. On my presenting mode. On my initial viz that Andy gave to the data for us, it was on eviction data for the US between 2000 and 2016. And this one I didn't feel quite so confident about taking so many years, so I did 5. I've taken a couple more this time, but the first time, so on this viz I thought, where would I set up my own eviction agency? Bit random, but I'm a very random person. So we can kind of see in this one that the Bronx, New York, the Bronx area is where we have most eviction agencies. It's a very small area, very dense. So I thought, so it's fairly obvious where I was going to set up my first branch. And actually expand it went from there. So depends how well it goes. So the data that Andy gave to us was fairly, not that one, there we go, was fairly clean. So I thought I'll make it a little bit harder for myself because I can't make it any simpler than that one. And I wanted to investigate why the evictions took place, see if I can understand the cause of them. So I thought, right, I will try marriage and divorce rates. Very, very random. Again, random person. I thought if we have a large amount of marriages or a large amount of divorces, it may send people into large amount of houses or small amount of houses. So, go into my Alteryx. Not quite as bad as Nick's, but it hurt my brain quite a lot. So, top container was divorce, presenting divorce data, second container was presenting the marriage data. They were both fairly similar. I didn't know at the time that I could join them and then cleanse it after. I should have done that. I know for next time. So I went through and it started out. I probably need to bring this up a bit because I can't actually see the data at the moment. There we go. So it started out a couple of null rows down the bottom, well, down the bottom and at the bottom of the data, also a couple of blank rows. It wasn't too bad. First I really wanted to get my titles into the title rows. So as Nick, same kind of thing, dynamic renames, so clearing out the top rows, dynamic renames to bring them up. And fairly similar to the marriage data as well. When I'd got to that point, I was at about this stage. So in order to bring this data with the eviction agency data that Andy gave to me, I had to transpose this so that the year fields came into a column, which I did here. There we are. So we can see by state all the way down.
Is the data just not available for California, I guess?
It was, but it was called California 1.
Oh, okay.
Don't know how many Californians there are, but I'm pretty sure.
There's probably like a footnote or something like that.
Yeah. I'm not sure, but I did fix that. I took cleansed the data, took the numbers out and that sort of thing. So after that, I did the same with the marriage data and joined them together and took the difference between a divorce and a marriage. So if it's positive, it means we have more people married in that year than yeah, easy way to explain it. And as you can see, Andy's data were a lot more simple because I only have very few steps. On Andy's data, it broken down by county. So I had to summarize that down because my first set only had it by state, which I did, and then I joined them all together. Left join was none, right join was none, so it was all good. And I only selected the data I needed, I outputted it to Excel and in Tableau. So, again, I didn't leave myself a huge amount of time, but what we can see is, if we take the whole of USA, see if we have what's it got? So if we have a decrease in the net amount of people married during 1 year, we have an increase in eviction filings. So potentially less people married, more people in separate houses. Maybe the potential rent goes up, which causes people to get evicted. Looking at different counties themselves, Montana kind of broke my heart when I saw it because it doesn't fit the trend. So that hurt a fair bit, but it's fair to say that a couple did work. Texas was an example, which was nice to see, even though I've never actually been to Texas. But again, evictions finally increased when that people married went down. And another example was Virginia, which also slightly to a lesser extent, but still worked for me. And that was where I got to.
Very good. So what do you think you would do different next time then?
Next time, I would have another look at the gross rent. I was thinking about normalising it by inflation to see if it would curve out. Also, the problem with that, the average gross rent data I downloaded I didn't realise till right at the end that it only did it every 3 years, which is why we've got 7 platinum.
Right.
But I've learned a lot, definitely. And
you can maybe look at the relationship between the different data points as well, right?
Yeah.
So this is just kind of separate, 4 separate things. Where you're talking about a relationship between them, but it's hard to see this way. So, whenever I'm trying to look at relationships between measures, first thing I create is a scatter plot just to see if there's any kind of relationship there. So that might be something to look at. Yeah.
definitely.
So that might be interesting to look at total evictions versus divorce rate or something like that.
Yeah.
Is there a reason you chose not to join up the lines?
Sorry, I didn't catch that one.
Is there a reason you chose to not join up the lines with the eviction party?
I currently don't know how to. When I do, I'll log on to my Tableau public and
We'll show you that right now. So the escape.
okay. Yes.
Go to that sheet.
Which we go to eviction. Okay.
And then you've got, so just change the mark type to a line.
Fair enough. That was easy enough. I should have played
Well,
around.
what happened was you probably were messing around with a different view and it changed to circles and then it just didn't switch back or something like that. So, yeah.
That was a lot easier than I was expecting.
It's okay.
I don't know what to say to that, but yeah. Thank you very much for the. I'll go change my other ones, and then I'll be saving.
So if you go back to your dashboard now, you'll see where that'll be a bit easier to see. Right?
Okay, it definitely is.
Patterns are a bit easier to
Just
see.
change the.
So can you just create a new sheet real quick?
Yes.
And let's see what that scatter plot would look like. So if you put, do you have the divorce rate or something like that?
I've got net people married.
Okay, that's fine. And then maybe against the eviction rate.
Just looking for it.
And then put state onto detail.
Yes.
And then put year on detail as well. That's going to give you every state every year, right? So okay, so that's one state as you go up.
Nevada. Nevada.
Yeah. Well,
that's
do you know
like
why
California.
that is? Why are so many people getting married in Nevada?
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, yeah. People,
Quick hop to Las Vegas.
People go there because it's like a $25 marriage or something like that. I imagine those people, if you follow those people, they probably don't last very long. But so what might be interesting now is if you filter out Nevada, because it's kind of Nevada's kind of like its own outlier there. So just drag it to. Just choose the none option first. At the bottom, the none button, and then scroll down to Nevada, and check it, and then hit the exclude option. So let's see.
It's more.
So you got another weird state.
Why?
Okay.
Now that I don't know enough.
Basically no evictions. Yeah. It's rude when you get evicted if you live in the line. Or it could have different laws or something. Oh, okay. Anyway, that's one way that when I'm looking at this kind of data, I'll try to look at scatter plots and see. We would have never noticed in the model thing probably that much.
Very interesting set of data for you.
Yeah.
And look forward to learning a bit more.
Cool. Well done. Good job. Thomas? Let's see. You'll probably need to sign back in again as well. Just close your computer, it just shuts you out. Just a refresh on the thing because it's going to make you log back in anyway. Yeah. Just do okay on all set. Just put your name in there so I know it's you when it comes up here. Let's go. Presenter. Okay, so now yes, do open store. Add Chrome, add extension, and now if you go back over to the other tab, we go to meeting, it'll start sharing. There you go.
Okay, there you go. Oh, hit the little hide thing too. Just yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Right. I have been looking at.
Don't forget to introduce yourself as well.
Thank you. My name's Tom. So this first week we've been dealing with Alteryx, and for my first application, I was looking at British arms export data. There's another joyous topic, and perhaps if we start at the end, where I wanted to end up was I wanted to join my arms export data, which I have in green, join that up with a database that is called Freedom in the World, which basically ranks countries in terms of freedom of the press and political civil liberties. We've got that in pink. And then at the bottom, which was the data set I added today, that is a data set which records deaths caused by conflict, ideally all over the world, but as it turns out, actually, I did not find one single data set that recorded events everywhere, as we'll probably see a bit later on. So there will be some countries that were excluded, sorry. So if you want to dive in very quickly, what I did here was, this was a data set collected by an organization called, I think, Campaign Against Arms Trade, and they basically drew data from the British government, and it was in separate files. So as we can see, it's just a little bit too small to read. There we go. The data set included applications for export licenses, some of which were denied. So obviously I needed to exclude those first. Then step 2 was some of those licenses were for transit. So there were exports that came from a different country, transited through the UK, and were then exported onto another country. So I wasn't interested in those either. Yes, I do really want to. Step 3, some of those exports were first exported to one country or shipped to one country, so from the UK to Italy, but they were meant for onward export, so they would maybe go from Italy to Morocco. So I added in the correct destination country. Step 4 is where things got a tiny bit messy because sometimes several shipments would be packaged into one. So there were sometimes there'd be 10 records of one single shipment. So one shipment will go to 10 different countries, and I had no way of knowing what share which country had. So there might have been 10 records. Maybe one was a nail, and the other was a £10 million fighter jet. I had no way of knowing. All I could do was just divide by number of countries. Cleaned that up, formatted the whole thing. I connected it to a geographical data set, which I didn't end up using. And then summarized the whole thing by year. Number 2 was the Freedom in the World data, which was fairly tricky because if we want to have a quick look at that, where's it gone? Basically, my data wasn't where I needed it to be. I wanted to be able to sort by countries. I wanted what is in the second row now to be my column headers. So with a lot of help from Rena, we did some jiggery-pokery in order to get that into the correct format, which would then look a little bit more like this. That's all right. Here we go. So we have several countries for that year. These are the scores, and then the status NF means that it's rated not free by this particular index. I joined that with the export data that I had from previously, and then went on and connected to my conflict data. I only had export data from 2008, so I excluded everything from before that. I then singled out the single actors, so single governments, because sometimes there would be joined together if it was a coalition, which led to some issues later on, as we will see, because what I forgot to do was to then somehow divide the number of casualties by the number of actors. So say if there were 10 coalition partners in any particular conflict, basically the number of deaths was multiplied by 10 as well, which then skewed my data drastically later on. Yeah, joined everything up and exported it for Tableau. And this is the visualization I ended up using. So what we have here is, right now I've got all selected. So we've got the total UK arms exports between 2008 and 2017. We've got the total number of deaths caused in that same time frame. Again, this is not a correct number because of how I aggregated the data. So there's been some mistakes that happened. The same thing I was really struck. And I first thought that I'd struck gold because in these bars, I have every single country and I've got the colors indicating whether or not this country is considered free by the Freedom Index. So we've got the free countries in blue and the unfree countries in red or orange. So we can see Britain exports a lot of weapons to so-called unfree countries, such as, for instance, what we've got here, Saudi Arabia is one very loyal client. But then the deaths that are caused are very much caused by the so-called free countries. So let's say, yeah, Finland, Norway. We've got a lot of European countries. But I then realized that that was because they were coalition partners. So say conflict in Afghanistan, we would have the United States plus Belgium plus the Netherlands plus Germany plus France. And I multiplied these numbers, which then skewed that bar massively. What you're able to do is select any given country, maybe pick one that's quite interesting to look at. How about this? So we see now the value of exports to the United States, we see the number of deaths caused by the United States, and we see how these two measures developed over time. What would be very interesting to add, and I didn't have time to do that, would be to see a kind of overall comparison of who are the main importers of British arms, who are the main responsibles, as it were, for conflict deaths, because right now all we can do is sort of drill into the detail, but we don't have an overall view of the whole thing. Yeah.
Can you show is this the one with the colors was your original? Is that right? Or which one is your? Did you show us your original text?
I did not.
I like how clean this one is.
Hang on, let's go to Tableau Public. That would be simpler. Yeah. Right, so this is the original. It loads. Can I make this go full screen?
Yeah, scroll down to the bottom. There's a full screen button on the bottom right, on the toolbar at the bottom.
Awesome. So here we have a more detailed, an absolutely disgusting scatter plot, but let's not worry about that for now. Just don't mind the y-axis. So basically here we've got single, no, that's too far. Here we've got the single countries ranked by freedom. So the free countries, just stop moving for a second. The free countries in the bottom left, and we've got exports on this y-axis, never mind the other one. So here, for instance, we have, as I said, Saudi Arabia, a very loyal customer to United Kingdom arms manufacturers. So what's quite interesting to see is, I think, these two clusters of not particularly free countries here, and then the other cluster of relatively free countries on the opposite end. So I think combining that with what I've done today to sort of get the overall view and then be able to drill down into the detail would be very interesting to do. questions?
You said,
So did you guys learn about the documentation this week? Did anybody teach you guys about that? Just coloring your boxes and...
I just kind of pick colors I like.
No, I mean, as far as writing out what each section of tools was doing, did somebody teach you guys that on?
Yeah.
Because I've seen that consistently across your work, so that's a really good thing to do is to document your work. So you got to think about if somebody else could pick this up, could they figure out what to do, right? Great. Well, that's good job. Going to attempt to get rid of the lag. So you're next, Harry. You might need to refresh it.
I had basically to do the same thing. Like there were sections of one idea.
So just go here. Turn your notifications off. Notifications are probably good. Is there a combo on here? No, it's not. Okay, just close it. Just close it. That way you don't dial in. So I'm going to ask you. Oh, there we go. Okay. Presenter. Okay, and then here. So add Chrome. Now if you switch back over to the other tab, you share screen, and then just hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm Harry. I initially looked at Premier League data, like with a lot of aspects, like from attendance and like yellow cards, red cards, goals scored, like every season. But that was like too broad, so I wanted to add data to define what I was looking for. FIFA ratings for teams. So I wanted to be able to compare like how teams were rated on FIFA, the game, compared to like how they actually did in the Premier League. So I started off with my initial data set. And just cleaned it up by like removing some unnecessary rows and added a data set with the most recent season because the initial one didn't have last season's data. And then I also added the FIFA data set and cleaned it up as well, just with like filters and removing null rows, things like that. I also had to format all the team name. I wish I knew about the fuzzy name tool as well, because I spent absolutely ages doing if statements. And it wasn't just for that one, it was for each direction that it came from. And it was things like Bolton Wanderers, Manchester United, WTD, and it wasn't just the difference between two data sets. Even within both data sets, it wasn't consistent. So that took a while. I removed leading spaces, but for some reason, even when I got all the names the same, there was 4 left. Manchester City, Swansea City, Brighton Hove Albion, and West Brom. They were like the exact same, but they still wouldn't join. And I found out it was because there was like a trailing space on the end of the word, but using data cleansing to get rid of it didn't work. And using a formula to like add a space and then do the end of the quotation mark didn't work either. So I asked Joe for help and he gave me this, which I think essentially on URLs it has like a %20, which it uses for spaces. And this, it basically had that, but it wasn't showing in Alteryx, but this gets rid of that. So then I was able to join the data. But they weren't metrics that could really be compared. So I had like goals for, goals against, and points. But then there was an attack score, a defense score, and an overall score on FIFA. And obviously these aren't like the same metrics, so I didn't really know how to compare it. So I tried to standardize it by first doing a transpose to put them all into a column with values, and then summarizing the values into averages and standard deviation, and then joining these together again and doing a formula to get the value minus the mean divided by the standard deviation. So for each value, the difference from the mean. So then for every team, for the Prem score and for the points in the Premier League, it would be the difference from the mean. And for their like overall rating on FIFA, it would be the difference from the mean. So then it could be something that could actually compare. That's cool. So I outputted that, and basically I'm an Everton fan. He's a bit bitter and buy into conspiracy theories. So I sort of assumed there would be a huge bias for Liverpool, who's Everton's rival, being seen as better than how they actually done, whereas Everton would be seen like underrated compared to how they actually done. But it turned out this wasn't really the case. About 47% of the time, Everton were overrated, and 53% of the time, Liverpool were overrated. And looking at the scatter plot, Everton were pretty spot on, like slightly underrated. Above the line, would suggest that the FIFA rating is higher than the points that they got. But below the line, they got more points than what they get given in FIFA rating. So Liverpool was actually quite a bit above the line, but in general, there wasn't much difference. And looking at like actual points, obviously Liverpool consistently do better than Everton, and FIFA rating they also do much better, and much better than the mean. But yeah, I think towards the end I sort of realised that when I prepped the data, it was like a general. The calculation that I'd done was like very general in terms of all figuring out the mean just like for every season. I think it would have been better if I could have done it for every season. What was the mean points and what was the mean FIFA rating? And I might find something different, but I didn't. So I'll probably do that next time.
Cool. It would be quite easy to add in because all you have to do is add here to your summarize and join back over.
Oh really? No, try that now.
You can use that for homework later.
Yeah. Okay.
Good. Well done.
One thing with feedback though is on your axis, make sure you change it from actual points because the quotes say actual points. So I don't know which one people want.
Yeah. So you. Yeah. All right. Who's next? How come all the guys went first? Oh, that's right. Yeah. 80's proud of your regex. Harry. Let's see. Okay, I just made you presenter, so where the heck is your...
It's open here.
This one? Okay, there we go. Open store.
Oh, I had
Add extension. Okay. No, that's okay. You wouldn't need to do that until I come back, and then we'll do share, and then we'll hide that little button there. And you are
live.
Okay.
I think Manuel has already filled up a notebook as well, right? Have you filled up your notebook yet?
Yeah. But you were sitting in the usual. You mean seating?
No, your
notebook. Oh, this one. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, I'm Manuela, and for the past 2 years, I've spent quite a lot of time in India. So this work is related to the work that I've done this past year, and it involved working with Indian government schools, which is a big network of over 1.4 million schools that serve about 140 million students. And since Indian independence from the UK, there have been quite some measures to improve learning levels and access to education. And one of them was the Right to Education Act, which aimed to ensure free and compulsory education for everyone. And it also included some provisions to, for example, to allow disadvantaged students to enter private schools. Like 25% of students have to come from disadvantaged backgrounds and so on. But we cannot deny that there is the education system is very fragmented in India, and because of an entrenched class and caste division, and also a binary educational path, because those who can afford to get enrolled in private schools do that, and parents give more value to not the first year's education, but the next ones. So they pick like a child and invest in that one, and doesn't allow the other ones to, or mainly females, to get enrolled. And so I was, after working with government schools in one district, in one area of one district in Delhi, I wondered what's the ratio between government schools and all the varieties of government schools that are there, because it's not only government schools, there are government-aided schools, co-ed schools, and then private schools. And I couldn't find data on the so-called low-cost private schools for the poor, which are not recognized by the system. And so there are different kinds of private schools. Like, these are only data on private schools that are, that require some fees, some annual fees. And so the first phase that I created was a dashboard of the pilot project, and with the area involved and the schools, etc. The average attendance with some additional. Oops. It's so big that it needs time to charge every time. Well, anyway, I created a template with random data just to not to show the names of the schools, but it has to charge anyway. So anyway, it was I collected data on the attendance of students and some more specific data on the attendance of within each class. And then some non-academic outcomes and how they performed compared to the previous months, and some some icons, different icons based on the number of goals that they had achieved every month, and then some results, the assessments, and teachers' attendance, and a timeline of activities. So this was the first application, and so what I wanted to do was to collect data on the distribution of schools within the districts in Delhi, and I started from official websites like this one. I found this new website that has been updated a few months ago, but we tried to. So mostly all the work has been trying to find
usable data, which is not so easy in areas where there are not so many open data available. So in this case, we had found the data, but we couldn't find a way to download them. So then I I found this website with just a list of schools and the different districts. So the problem was that in 2012 they had separated. They have introduced a new district distribution in like classification in Delhi. So some data were available with the previous classification. So for example, average income or other variables that I was interested in related to the 2011 census data, and so I couldn't find the other ones. So yes, this is a file collecting all this information from the different kinds of schools. So I cleaned a little bit, and then I started to work on some data sets on the new districts, but there was no way of matching them all because they didn't, like the distribution didn't match, so I connected the first data set with a shapefile of the old district distribution, which was quite hard to find because the only data available were about the new distribution, and then here another. Another data set from another department of education, which I had to clean a little bit, but I mean, it was not much work. And then I merged the three of them, and I moved to Tableau. Unfortunately, there were some issues with Alteryx this morning, and what I wanted to do was to merge all these additional statistics district-wise, which related to the new district classification, and I found some sub-districts in the previous one, and I wanted to match them in order to use those data here. But it took quite some time to just solve a few problems, so we couldn't manage. And there were different data sets, and it's something that I'm going to do in another phase. Okay, so yeah.
Do you know about the file input there?
What?
From your files.
So in here, I wanted to input them all together, but the problem is that on this website you have to manually select each district within the municipality of Delhi, and they're not clean. We have to clean a lot of rows and stuff. So we try to merge them and upload them all together, but it's not possible. And I wondered how it could be done if I had to select all of them. Like,
sounds like a great macro project, doesn't it? You'll do this as an exercise.
Okay. Yeah, because oops. This is how it looks like, and I couldn't find a way to upload them to input them all together. So, yeah, and that's it. So I grouped the schools into categories: private schools and government primary schools, which include all the other ones. So those recognized by the Department of Education, the municipality of Delhi. It's quite a messy classification. And
can you put it in a presentation?
Yes. And on the right, I try to compare the districts with the highest literacy rates with the government and private school ratio, and it seems to cross quite a bit. So in the districts with the highest literacy rate, there is a lower ratio. So basically, the government schools are not so widespread. So basically, in New Delhi, one of the healthiest districts, the ratio is quite low because there are a lot of private schools, and the government schools haven't been displaced all over the place. While in the western districts, they're almost spread every 500 meters. So this is what I managed to do. I wanted to work on the additional data on average income and so on, but the problem was really merging the data sets.
Well, just keep that website in mind for when we start working with macros, because that'd be a very good exercise for that. How you can teach Alteryx to go through all of the pages and pull all the data down without you having to do anything, without you having to do it manually, I guess.
Also, in other websites, you have to ask permission. I sent requests, but they didn't accept it. So basically, data analysis is not enough for them.
Right. Okay, good job.
It's good that you guys are all running into challenges. That means you'll learn more. All right. Ellie, I think you need to sign back in as well. Let's go back there.
Yeah.
Just hit refresh. Yeah. It says you're still in, but you're really not.
Yeah.
Phone call. Okay. All right. I think
Don't
you're
you
in
need
there.
to
So
go
I
on?
will. No, you're already, because you said to dial in as.
All right.
Yeah. So now, if you go back to, so do add open store, this one, and then add to Chrome, and then add extension. Okay, and now go over to get back over to the other tab. Sure.
Okay.
And there's a
Cool.
little hide thing over there. Yeah.
Thanks. Cool. So I'm Ellie. I've worked in market research the last couple of years. Before that, I worked for the Met Office, sort of partly analysing weather data. But that was shift work, so I decided I didn't want to do shift work, but that's another story. So therefore, my first viz was looking at the Met Office data, because I knew where it was and I had a pattern for it, and essentially answered the question, the UK has definitely got hotter over the last 50 years, which is quite scary, really. Because if you look at the bottom right, the number of years where the maximum temperature is above the 50-year average, so decadally looking at that. In the noughties, every single year was above the 50-year average, which is quite scary. So therefore, I kind of to look into the next set of data. Initially, I wanted to look at whether other regions were also experiencing this temperature increase, like the United States or other countries I could find. But despite the freedom of information, it was quite hard to find the US climate data from the NOAA or the GFS model. So therefore, I thought I would look into ways of explaining why the UK's got hotter. And also, to start with, this data initially was comes out like this. So you go here and there's a different historical data points, and you click on one and it comes out in a text file. So initially, I manually copied all this into Excel and had a tab per data, per station. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to use APIs and dynamic inputs, but within the time limit sort of didn't go into that as we've not learned APIs yet in Alteryx. So I thought that might be a bit too much of a challenge given that we started on Alteryx this week. So I used my initial one, which I had done manually, and had it all in one sheet back in sort of June, July when I applied. This has all of the various station data. So if I go to Alteryx, and this is my top one here. So I loaded that file and sort of just cleaned it a bit. So I lost any missing values because it had every year and all the stations. I also then changed the date format into a string so that I could use a date time pass formula to assign it to a proper date so that Tableau could actually understand it. And then change some of the country codes so that when I joined it to other data I'd found, it would all sort of union quite nicely. I also renamed one of the fields because I had it as UK in my data and I wanted it to be United Kingdom to match the other data set. So firstly, I found a data set about methane emissions. Didn't end up actually using this because the regions were a bit weird and the scale wasn't quite nice. Wasn't nice enough, but sort of did a similar thing, cleaned it up. So the ones I did use was a CO2 emissions from the Hawaii station, which is sort of global level CO2 emissions. I had to rename this because dynamically rename the fields because they were lower down in the data set, and I wanted them to be obviously field names, and also re-skipped it because there was sort of a break between the headers and the actual data. And I updated the field names because they're a bit messy and changed the data, the date, sort of copied what I did earlier, changed the date into a string and did the date time pass. And also filtered out, again, any missing values, but in this case, instead of them being null, it was minus 99.99. And added a global column for the region because to match up with the other data sets, they all had like United Kingdom or other countries, so wanted it to be sort of neat. And then these two are very similar. I found particle concentration and nitrous oxide concentrations and sort of did the same thing. But because climate data online is sort of in the format of ready for analysis rather than being presented as a table, it was all relatively clean data, which was quite annoying because I'd actually searched for quite a while for some messy data sets, but I couldn't find any. So ended up just unioning them so that all the date was the common field and they were all stacked according to date, and then output that into Tableau. So this was what I reworked it as, and sort of explored why the UK was getting hotter. So you sort of on the left-hand side is what's similar to what I did before. I had the trend chart showing that it was getting hotter, and then I also used explored a bit more of the spatial data for the Met Office data and looked at the different years, and then this also changes if you select certain things as well. You can explore more of the sort of visual change of regional in the UK change. But also it actually looked like the UK air pollution is actually improving, which I thought was a bit odd, but then realised that it's probably because some of the legislation came in sort of around 1996 was when CFCs were banned from refrigeration and aerosols. So whilst on a regional level and a national level, we're actually improving our sort of emissions, and therefore you should expect regionally that temperatures wouldn't be as extreme. But because actually globally, developing countries are still emitting, and also there's such a lag effect that you can see in the monthly CO2 emissions that it's still massively increasing. So that's why you see such a hot UK at the moment and why we're getting more heat waves.
Very cool. Well done. Very good analysis too. Yeah, good. Any feedback?
What does the bottom right chart look like? Start on the y-axis. 0.
Well, because it's only sort of goes from 1950, it's sort of relatively similar. How do I get out of here? Not quite as steep, but still scary enough above the average.
So those must be summers and things, right?
Yeah, so it's a diurnal.
Seasonality.
Yeah, it's a healing curve.
If you make it quarter instead of month.
just lessens it a bit.
Okay, doesn't really do much.
No.
Jump into your Alteryx.
Whereabouts?
As just a quick note, you have your calculation which says global in it.
Yes.
You could just use a normal formula tool for that one.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and get use of the data parsing.
Thank you.
All right.
Cool.
Well done.
Do I just close the? Oh, okay. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, so go back over to Chrome. Oh my God.
I know.
Where's your Chrome with your GoToMeeting? Yeah, there you go. So we'll go here and we'll do. Just refresh it. Make the presenter again. Presenter. We'll only have to do this one time. Just allows you to present.
Where am I going? Okay, so my original data set was very simple.
Can you hit that little hide thing button? Sorry, I should have done that for you.
So I was going to say my name is Neha. So my data set was just about Syria. The data set actually had about 7.5 years in it. I deduced it down just to 2018 because I was specifically interested myself in what was going on in 2018, as a lot less stuff was happening in the news of Syria. So I just had to look at that. Kind of tells you who, like what demographics they are, whether they're civilian or not in the tooltip as well, and allowed for some interactivity. Like for example, what's the Syrian government kind of using, and so forth, and kind of when it was happening in like every day basically for 2018 at that point in time. So what I wanted to have a look at was kind of how immigration, well not immigration, but refugees and asylum seekers cases have increased throughout this period. So beginning of a lot of this that's been happening in Syria has been from 2011, which is when the revolution occurred. So I basically started to have a look at that. So I brought in my original data, and I don't think that's the original data set. I think that is. So yeah, I just basically brought that back in and basically just used all the years and all the information that I had. But I also had to strip it down to actually make it fit into the other data sets that I found. So I found Syrian immigration factors and figures. Basically, the workflow looks a bit more complex than it is, but it's basically all the same thing. So I used the one data source that I found, but they had a couple different pages for the same thing, so they laid it out very similarly. So when I decided to add something back into it, I just made a new workflow, copy and pasted, basically some corrections and figured it around. But I didn't want to rewrite over what I had done, so that's why I just kept copying and pasting and redoing it to make sure that I knew what was going on every step without messing it up. So when I actually did it, I started originally getting data from 2011 to 2017, so it related to my data that I originally had with the data source. But what I wanted to have a look at afterwards was actually what happened prior to those years, for 10 years before that, with immigration, and see how that changed after the revolution started. So I made my dashboard about that. So at the top here, it basically just kind of tells you the deaths in 2011, 2017, and how many there have been in total for every year. And then here you can just kind of see which one, if you're just intrigued by how they were actually killed. The other reason why I added that in was because I wanted to make it add a little bit more something into my Alteryx flow. It was very simple, so that one just needed me to cross tab, so I thought I'd throw that in there to get more information out of it. And then if you go down here,
you can see the blue line over here will either represent refugee cases or asylum seeker cases. So with asylum, you can kind of see that it does kind of follow along some sort of trends with the amount of deaths, in a sense that there's a lag. It would suggest that maybe I could do something maybe on Alteryx to actually give it that lag and see if it correlates a bit more better, but that would be something for another time to think about. And then the refugee cases, you can kind of just see from here that it's just been on the incline steadily throughout the years. Even though that deaths may be decreasing, the country itself is in disorder, so no one would actually want to be there to even survive, even if they're not dying from conflict. At the bottom, this is kind of what I added last minute, which was me just adding the year 10 years prior to the start of the revolution and how it changed. So it's a little bit messy, but if you can see here at the bottom, we have the sum of people that actually applied for asylum seeking and how it actually started to increase from 2011. Wow. And what you see here is actually, I feel like I should have made it a bit bigger.
Was the data complete for 2017, do you know?
2017, yes, it should.
Okay.
I want to cheat and kind of just make this bigger for you to see, but basically what you can see with this one, let me just go here so I can show you, is that the start of the revolution is 2011. There was a lot more people being accepted for cases, largely due to the fact that not a lot of people were requesting for it as well. But once 2011 hit, it decreased drastically, which is probably due to the fact that a lot more people were requesting asylum. Yeah, something to look at. Yeah. And that was it.
So, can you go back to that sheet?
Which one?
I think this is funny. I love your naming conventions.
Oh, don't please.
So go back to your, you see the data source name? Go back to your sheet.
Oh yeah, don't.
Really new. You guys see like final. Yeah. No, it's okay. It's how you iterate through it. But no, it's fine. So what's something you would do different next time?
I think basically one thing I would have liked to say is kind of any conflict deaths prior to 2011, which was not in my original data. But just kind of see what happened there, because people were still trying to claim asylum and everything, so it's kind of, people were accepted previously, kind of what was going on at that time and how people were actually dying.
Okay.
And just kind of bring that in and just try to compare that as well.
Okay. Great. Any feedback?
One thing I've noticed a lot of you guys doing is using, like you've got Excel sources that have header information, and then you happen to do skip and dynamic read it. You can actually do that all in just the input tool. Do you guys know that? Open up your Alteryx play and just copy one of those inputs into a new worksheet that you have to do that on. So the Syria immigrant type, perfect. So
yeah.
Just go on the, click on that, expand the configuration window.
Yeah. Oh no, this one or this one?
Yeah, and scroll down in the panel.
So she wants to uncheck.
And select Start Data Import on line 2 or 3, I guess 2. I don't know, 3 probably, I guess. And that should deal with your thing. Just check.
Now it's going to skip those as now it's going to start over at 5. Yeah.
So now just check your check the output from the input tool.
Yeah, but she still has her skip in there.
Yeah, you need to cut that out, but in general, yeah.
Okay.
So you need to just one more and then it'll work.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, you might need to skip it. So if you skip,
is that coming first line from the sheet or first line from the
I think first line point you're unfortunately might start line 3 and then it will automatically go up. Have a play around. But that's
he did pass the expert exam, so
that is true. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Yeah. Last one.
Keep going.
You've got a big job here as the closer.
Oh. I wanted to go earlier, but everyone's so fast.
Let's get you set up here. All right, so let's refresh this. And move on. Okay. Then I'm going to now make you the presenter. Okay. Now it's going to ask you this. Okay, and then share and hide. Okay, there you go.
Okay. Sorry for my tabs, they're not relevant. So, thank you for noticing a trend with all of our data sets.
Don't forget to introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah, I'm Louise. I think I've met most of you, but those I haven't, hello. So yeah, my initial viz, which I made back in August around then, was on police violence in the US, so quite topical. So this is my first viz. I think it's not bad, but Carl had a few things to say, but yeah, he didn't like the slider. I understand why. It looks a bit funny now because of the formatting, but yeah. Okay, so let's see. So what I wanted to do with that data was to basically, let's go back actually. So from this, you can see that obviously California, Texas, Florida, more deaths in those areas, makes sense, bigger populations on metropolitan areas. You can see that, so if I go down to slope chart, yeah, so and this here, the first bit here is the number of deaths that would occur if it was proportional to the demographic of the US, and this is how it actually is. So you can see the trends racially with how people are killed most commonly, so by gunshot, which I should have higher. But yeah, so from after this data, I thought I'd like to know, does crime play a part into this? So do areas where more crimes are committed, does that mean there is more police violence? You would think that would make sense. So I actually used data similar to Nick's original data, which looked at urban crimes from the FBI website. So yeah, the original Excels, which I had open, but I've now closed for some reason. Okay. The original Excel file wasn't too bad. Needed a bit of cleaning. Like some really strange things, like in gender, some of them said white as a gender. So I had to change that. Yeah. I had to look at the names, and it was Joe and stuff like that, so it's obviously male unless, yeah, I might be wrong. But stuff like that, it's just like stupid things that were inputted incorrectly, so I changed those manually. Well, I guess not manually. Then what did I do next? So I cleaned up all the columns.
A lot of cleaning up, manually cleaning things up.
Yeah. There was a lot of really weird things, like how can age be LA, you know? So I just changed it to
Was everything
unknown.
shifted in one column?
No.
Okay.
No, it was like these single cases where it was like this.
Okay, like
yeah.
data entry or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So yeah, I had to go through, like, look at unique values and then basically change those. There was one, where is it gone? Cause of death, where I didn't realize that I could make like a reference with an in-text input instead of doing this really long else if. Alright, I know. Then when Mina walked past and she was like, "Oh my god, you know, you could have done that." And I was like, oh, "I'm already most of the way there." So.
I'm committed.
Yeah, exactly. I was already on like P, so I thought let's just get to Z. So yeah, cleaned up all that data. All good with that. So this is the data coming in from the FBI's crime. So it looks at violent crime, property crime, so what you saw in Nick's presentation, so I won't go through that too much. So I cleaned up that data. It was straightforward pretty much. So I ended up with
Oh yeah. Yeah. So it looks really nice. Has crime, so violent types, property types. So these rates are per 100,000 inhabitants. So in Akron, 238.4 crimes per 100,000 inhabitants. So I joined those together, well, unioned them together, put them into Tableau. There was an issue though, because these are metropolitan statistical areas, which for some reason when I put into Tableau, even though they have an MSA function in the geography, it didn't recognize any of them. So I wasn't able to look at it in like a...
Did you set the country correctly?
Yeah. Yeah, it just wasn't able to recognize them. So unfortunately, I was only able to look at it at state level, even though I wanted to look in more detail into the cities, which would have been quite interesting. So if I just go to my first slide. Also, I should have made it a bit bigger.
It's okay.
Yeah. So this first map, the map in the back. So I've overlaid the two datasets I got. So you see the darker greys mean that there are more crimes committed in those states per 100,000 inhabitants. So California, Texas, Florida, like we saw before, and all these few crimes, obviously, because there is nothing in those areas, besides fields and other crap. So yeah, you can see each of the dots represents a single case of police violence, i.e. someone being killed by police. So very heavily on this side and over here. So for these states, California and Texas and Florida, it makes sense, more crime, more deaths. Was what I expected. And then there are quite a lot in these areas over here. It seems to be like needless killing, considering the crime. I don't know. I didn't read through the individual circumstances of all of them because they're quite depressing. But yeah, so this is Alaska and Hawaii as well. So if we go through, we can see in a bit more detail about these victims. So you can choose in the first one what gender you would like to look at, so how many male victims and female victims. So the one you selected is the one in red.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so you can see largely male victims. And if I go to the next one, we can look at whether the victims were armed or not when they were killed. So allegedly armed, yeah. It's like there's no. Surely, if you killed them, you would inspect their body and find out whether they were armed or not, instead of having some allegedly at the end. So yeah, unarmed. Yes, it's in red, the unarmed people. And unknown. How do you not know? Yeah. So most of them were allegedly armed. If we look at race into this, so the vast majority, you can see from here that the vast majority of people who killed were white, but from the slope graph we saw before, I wasn't able to include it. It's all about proportions and demographics, so sheer numbers, yes.
You showed one where I think, so white was the highest in the popular, or it was highest on the left side, but lowest on the right?
Yeah, not lowest, but lower.
Or lower, right.
Yeah.
And then
so
I think black was the opposite?
Yeah, so disproportionately, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
No. Let's see if I go into presentation mode. Oh, can't really zoom in either. But so this one, which is Pacific Islanders, and it changes. Yeah, it's predominantly black people, unfortunately. Okay, if I go back to this, so yeah, you can go through them and see where it stacks up. Again, a lot of unknowns. I don't understand. But so if I go back to the intro, it was actually the original data was from a Makeover Monday from 2016. So it was from mappingviolence.org and the crime data I got from the FBI website. Yeah. So cause of death, how are they most commonly killed? Most obviously gunshot. Next, vehicle. So some of them are really sad. Stuff like negligence, beaten to death, that kind of thing. So beanbag. Nick told me it's this sort of gun thingy where you shoot a beanbag like really hard, like this kind of thing, and so
Rubber bullets or something, sort of.
I don't know. Yeah. Death by that. So one death in
One.
a 3-year period.
Well, at least it's in Chicago.
Yeah. I don't know. That was the cause of death. Yeah, it could have been multiple reasons, really. Like maybe that's not just the only thing that killed them. Maybe, yeah. Okay. If we go through to that's all I did. But yes, is there anything that you guys want to look at that you're interested in?
I think it's really good how you did the coloring and stuff on this. Broke it up into separate pieces. I think that's really good.
Yeah, I wanted to, because I did these with parameter controls, and I wanted to have like one page where I would just have like all the different parameters on the side, and you could pick one and not all the others. It's like when you upload a Tableau profile, Tableau public, it would be nice just to have one page instead of a story. So I don't know if there's a way to do that.
Well, you can't like lock one parameter after another one's used.
I guess it's not possible to do that.
Not now.
Oh yeah, okay. So it worked fine for a presentation because I just clicked through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what you're doing anyway. You're giving a presentation.
Yeah.
That's very good. Nice
Thank
work.
you.
Yeah. So what's something you would do different than next time as well?
So I find a way to look at it in more into the cities. It's like you see like all these concentrations. I would like to look at Los Angeles.
So I like when Tableau 2018.3 comes out. It has a new density map feature.
Oh, okay.
So if you go to your first your intro map,
yep.
That's just a single color.
Yep.
This would be particularly interesting with the density mark type because you would see the concentrations better. Are you guys familiar with that? What a density map is? It's kind of like one of those ones that like radiates, sort of. And it gets a darker color when there's more clustered together, kind of thing. This would probably look really cool like that. So when that comes out, I'd be curious to see you redo the just change. All you do is change the mark type and you're done. So it's really simple.
When's it coming out? When's it coming out?
Good question. I've been asking for a couple months. So,
wow. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Nice work. Good job.
Thank you.
All right. So we do have a guest here. Should we make Amanda present her? You want to present your application?
No.
No guts. Okay. Should I make her do it? Come on, Amanda. You got to come up and present as well, since you're a guest. I don't know. We'll present your initial application.
That's horrible.
Do you know which one it is? Well, we can show how far you've come.
Yeah, I think it's the one at the bottom.
So
but we did do a reviz of it,
so you can show both of them.
Show both of them.
Yeah. Let's see. So this would be you.
And
you're an ambassador as well, right?
I
you
am.
Want to tell them what that means?
It's true.
You only have 30 vises?
I know I haven't done much, and I don't know why I'm an ambassador.
That's pretty pathetic.
It is.
Yeah.
But, they let me stay on the program, so
this
I'm
is your
kind
original,
of okay with that.
And this is your reviz. Okay.
It's true. Yes, so I'm pretty sure you know that Andy is a Tableau Zen Master. So aside from the Zen Masters, Tableau also has a group of people they call the ambassadors, and they have a few different streams of this. So they've got the public ambassadors, they've got the social, the TUG, the Tableau user group ambassadors, possibly one more, I'm not quite sure. One fine day they just phoned me up and said, would you like to be one of our Tableau public ambassadors? And I thought, yeah, sure, that sounds amazing. It's been actually really nice. It's I don't know how much you guys are part of the Tableau community yet. Have you guys already set up all your Twitter accounts and your... Okay, then I need to find all of you on Twitter, please.
I'll create a list.
Please come by and help me find you. That's it really. That's all being an ambassador is. I just like to get on Twitter, help people or make them feel welcome, and if I can, which is not usually the case, help them out with their vizzes. But, I'd like to help them create some positivity around doing data visualization. I realized that quite possibly when Andy introduced me earlier that you guys were working, so you might not have heard who I was. I'm Amanda. I was in DS3, so one of the first few cohorts. After I finished at the data school, I moved back to Amsterdam about 6 months ago, and I just started.
Your placements?
Oh, my placements were at Eli Lilly, which I don't think you do placements with them anymore.
We haven't in a while.
Yeah. That was a pharmaceutical company, which for me was really perfect because I had just left biological research to take up the job here to learn more about analytics. And for me, that was sort of quite a perfect sort of bridge to see how I could move from the academic space into the analytics space, or the more business-based analytics space. And then after that, I spent a year at Boston Consulting Group. So I think there's quite a few of us who have been at Boston Consulting Group, but basically there you sit on a team that I like to say is the consultant to the consultants. So we just help them out wherever.
You do all the work.
Sorry?
You do all the work.
We do, yeah. They get the credit, we get the work.
Right.
Kind of, not really. They do work hard. Well, they work many hours. That's true. No, but that's a cool one. So you get to sort of sit on their team, and then every couple of weeks you get a new project, kind of like you do here actually, the data school. Basically, it's just like the data school, but with a little bit less coaching. Get to work on cool new projects every now and again. So yes, I had never used Tableau before I started my application to the data school, which is probably why Andy was telling you I was bugging him for a year before the application. I still think that's not quite true.
It was like 10 months.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, something like that. 11 and a half.
Take two.
Yeah. So I had a really hard time putting together my DS application, but I knew it was something I really wanted. So I invested a lot of time into learning how to use Tableau. And of course, because I had looked at all of the Tableau videos that they have on the website, I decided that for my application, I was going to put in everything I'd learned from these videos. So I made.
Who else did that for their application? Just about everybody?
Yeah. Yep. So
you should have seen Robin's, man. That was so like bubbles all over the place.
Yeah. I was like, 4 different things in it. Yeah. Lots of colors and pie charts. Andy loves that. But you made it, so it's fine. Okay, so the data set that I eventually used, because I actually also had a really hard time finding data that I found useful.
Put it in full screen?
Can I? Yeah, I probably could. There you go.
Little black box.
Yeah, what is the black box?
You just hit that little tiny little arrow that's up. Yeah, I don't know why I don't even know what it is.
All right. So bear with me. I haven't looked at this in about 2 years, but So I used the UK price property paid data of one single year because I couldn't fit the whole thing in Tableau. I actually chose this because at the time it was quite relevant to me. I was actually looking at house prices. So yeah, I used story points, which I don't think I've ever used story points since this viz. For me, it just doesn't work anymore. But I made a cute little story about the prices of housing in the UK. So I don't know if you're probably familiar with the UK price property data. It just tells you how much a house sold for wherever it might be. Quite clearly, or in the South here, Londonish area, houses are more expensive.
We have this data source on our Tableau server as well.
It's probably a better way than this. God, what did I do? All right, so I looked at this by borough, looked at what was most expensive. Same story. London is expensive, basically. Oh yeah. I'm also really good at spelling, just so you know. This again is a beautiful. Both of these beautiful.
I don't remember. I probably got sick.
I hope that's probably why I got in. You didn't look that far. Yeah, just a really nice set of easy to free charts about.
Oh, it's latitude and longitude.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a map.
Yeah, but I couldn't get the map to work. So something happened. It didn't work, but you know, it's okay. We live and we learn. And nice little. Whoa, that's really nice line chart, which I'm assuming again shows prices over time by borough. And then got down to the thick of it, comparing Hackney and Tower Hamlets, because those were the two areas I was looking at. And have a really nice, really squished up chart over here, mainly because I thought that looked cool, and that didn't, which is true. It doesn't look cool. So, much like you're doing now, we did a reviz of our first applications in, I'm not sure, I think it was also in week 1 or 2.
Week 1, for you guys
Yeah.
in week 1.
Yeah, so this was basically just after learning a few of Andy's data viz best practices, where I realized actually I only really need to incorporate basically the last part of this, because the question I'm asking is, where's a better place to buy? Where's a more affordable place to buy? Also realized that made it sound like I actually have the funds to buy. I don't, just putting it out there. But yeah, so the question is, where is a better place to invest? Not entirely sure it still really answers the question. But of the two areas that I wanted, yeah, I mean, this just gets rid of all of the stuff in the beginning where... Full screen. You can, oh, there's more. Oh, God, what am I doing?
Hit the little house.
Hit the little house, yeah. I don't think I've ever presented Tableau on a Mac before.
Well, you are now?
Yeah, first time for everything. So, yeah, I basically just skipped all of the stuff in front of it because it might have looked, well, I might have thought it looked cool, but it didn't really add anything to the question I was trying to answer, which is, where should I invest? Okay, so this is super simple. So now I'm just looking at, I suppose I ranked all of the boroughs in London by the average house price, and then just kind of highlighted the ones that I was actually interested in.
I'm curious to see why it goes 1, 2, 3, 14.
Because I didn't want to have 33 bars in it.
So you filter some of them out.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to show the top ones, the bottom ones.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And
the two in question. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I still put in the map, which
so the green's expensive and the brown's less expensive, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, here I can select the boroughs. That was clever. Great. Because I was only looking in Hackney and Tower Hamlets. So now I can compare in both of the two boroughs I'm interested in the spread of house prices. Looks like they're both the same map to me. Oh, no, there we go. Yes, so it does change. And then just some nice comparisons along the bottom, which showed me that the average change in house price in Hackney goes up more than in Tower Hamlets, so that's the better investment to make. That was it.
Well,
yeah. Well done.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thanks
for listening.
Well done, guys. Good job. I'm going to